Good afternoon. My name is Abraham Kim. I'm the Vice President of the Korea Economic Institute. I want to welcome you, all of you, to the Hanmi Club Korea Economic Institute of America seminar on assessing the U.S.-Korea relationship, looking ahead. We are greatly honored by this opportunity to co-host with this distinguished group of journalists and broadcasting leaders who have spent their careers reporting on the U.S.-Korea alliance and the political and economic situation on the Korean Peninsula. With President Park Geun-hye's successful visit to Washington, D.C. last week, I do not know a better way than to bring together leading experts and opinion makers today to give their assessment of her recent trip, but also to look forward to the future, to what opportunities and challenges that lay ahead for this important bilateral alliance. On the 60th anniversary of the U.S.-Korea alliance, I think all of you will agree the bilateral ties are stronger than ever, and the prospects for even closer cooperation to deal with regional and global problems are positive. I hope all of you are looking forward to today's panel as much as I am. And today I have the distinguished honor as well to invite my co-host and co-moderator for this afternoon's program, Mr. David Pong, Chairman of the Hanmi Club, to say a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. With a successful summit between President Barack Obama and our President Park Geun-hye, the U.S.-Korea alliance has opened a new chapter, it says. As in all bilateral relationship, there are new opportunities and tough challenges ahead as the two governments work together for further strengthening cooperation and deepening ties. About a decade ago, a friend of mine who was in town in Seoul as a new ambassador from Washington to Korea sort of asked me some help. Hey, David, can you do me a favor? I don't do any favor to Americans, but this guy was so sincere in asking, so what do you mean by that? And we had a big lunch. Over the lunch, he said, gee, it was under the President Nomuhyun, a little bit liberal, the politician who led the leftist, the political camp at the time. I was a little bit against him sometimes, since I was not a good journalist, but good anchorman at the time. But he said something that I wouldn't be very fond of. He thought, and his people thought, the Nomuhyun's people thought, they could do without Americans and American troops and American help. And I was strongly against that. And those members who are at present here, who will talk to you and discuss the problem, the issues between U.S. and Korea, we are heavily dependent upon the American support at the time, since we are being confronted with the bellicose North Korean communist troops along the DMZ and so forth. So this American friend, your ambassador there, said, what can I do to amend this situation? I said, yeah, go around and talk to the people. There are lots of people who will support whatever you say as to enhancing the relations and understanding between two peoples. He said, okay. So we start having seminars and symposiums, small gatherings at his residence and at the press club. And finally, those who attended the meetings, the mostly former Washington correspondent, thought that why not we just inaugurate some kind of gathering, like a club. So Korean-American Club was born at the time, about 10 years of time. And for the last 7 years, we've been having seminars annually. with the American University, and except this year because American University has the commencement ceremony this time. So I talked to Abraham Kim and a few others at the KEI whether they would be interested in having seminars with us. This is okay. So that's what it happens here right now, and I'm very glad that I come back to KEI. When I was chairman of foreign affairs at the time in the 80s, I used to have seminars with the CSIS. Very good and very efficient organizations. But I think KEI is better known in Korea, and which is more efficient sometimes. Not with the other institutions like a Brookings Institution or Heritage Foundation and CSIs. They're all good people, good organizations, but KEI is a lot better for us. So I'm glad that we can have this seminar with them. All right. I'm not going to go any further, but I'm going to stop gibbering anymore by introducing some of you friends who are who will speak to us. I brought a number of well-known senior journalists with me. They are very, very well-known. They are tough people, and I'm going to ask them to stand up, rise from the chair when I introduce them. I'm the chairman of the Korean American Hanmi Club, and my secretary is Dr. Nam Cha-soon. He's a PhD in political science, but from Ilbo, my secretary there. Nothing. He has no relationship with the former President Geun-hye, anyways. And Mr. Kim Chang-gi, the incumbent president publisher of Chosun Ilbo's weekly publications, he also covers the monthly, weekly, and everything. He's number one man in Chosun Ilbo, other than owner himself. Here's some former congressmen like great chairman An and so forth. But when I was managing editor, everybody was scared of it. But he's a very good person, though. Mr. Park Jong-chan, right there. Only a few weeks ago, he was the president of Yonhap News, which is like the Associated Press in Korea. And Mr. Kim Sang-kyun, former president of MBC Kwang-ju and Masan. Here. About 10 years ago, he served here as a bureau chief of MBC. Well, a couple of more persons to introduce to you. Mr. Kook Ki-yeon, Washington correspondent of Segye Times, who serves as the Washington director for us. And Abram, can I introduce the speakers as well? Maybe? Okay. With your permission, I'm going to introduce them. All right. Dr. Lou Goodman, who has been the Dean of School of International Service at American University until only recently. He has been dean at there 23 years, and where he had 6 seminars with us. I express my appreciation. Mr. Gordon Flake, right here, and the executive director, Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation, who is better known in Korea than here, actually. Yeah, he speaks Korean more fluently than me. I'm a Maureen, and especially on the issues of Korean Peninsula. Mr. Evans Revere, my best friend, former president of Korea Society and senior director of the Albright Stonebridge. And Evans and I have been known each other for many years back while he was in Seoul. And you've been the acting Secretary of State, right? For East Asian Pacific, yeah. And he's a bad Catholic as me. And okay, who else? Finally, It will be my great honor to introduce one of the top-notch person in Korea who serves in Washington, D.C., my ambassador, Choi Young-jin. His Excellency Choi Young-jin has really served very well, and he's one of the few diplomats. I've been covering the foreign minister for 3 years from 1958 to 61 until there's a military coup. And this is the one guy that I really recommend to the new president to be maybe prime minister. We have prime minister, so better. Deputy prime minister level of diplomatic service. Choi Young-jin really made this Buckingham visit very, very successful. So I like to really ask you to give him big hands. That's all. And why not I ask His Excellency Choi Young-jin, our ambassador, to come and... Can I do that? Okay. Sure. Oh. Why do you put this kind of thing here in the...
Good afternoon, dear friends. Dr. Abraham Kim, Chairman Pong, distinguished speakers and guests, my dear friends and colleagues. I'm pleased to be here today's program with the KEI and Hanmi Club. The timing of today's event regarding the future of Korea-US relations could not be better. It takes place on the heels of a very successful summit meeting. President Park's visit was a historic milestone in the Korea-US alliance. In their meetings, Presidents Park and Obama set the tone for the next 4 to 5 years in our country's bilateral relationship. And as President Park indicated, both before a joint session of Congress and at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we are at a high point in our 60-year alliance. Our solidarity with regard to North Korea is resolute and firm. And the FTA, Free Trade Agreement, makes us more economically interdependent and interconnected than ever before. But as President Park pointed out, her vision goes beyond the bilateral. It is also regional and global. She wants to see Korea contribute to peace and prosperity throughout the Korean Peninsula, Northeast Asia, and beyond. Today's panelists have much insight on challenges and opportunities that Korea faces ahead, not only with regards to the bilateral relationship between Korea and the US, but also President Park's regional and global vision. North Korea, the subject of this afternoon's second panel, necessarily looms large in this discussion. I am confident that eminent panelists will be able to share different perspectives on the Korea-US alliance and visions for the future, including possibly the possible resolution with regard to the North Korean question. It is a pleasure to be here today and welcome you to what promises to be a very engaging program. Thank you.
If I may ask our panelists to take our seats.
While they are being seated, I'd like to add one more thing. Without some personal and official assistance, this kind of thing wouldn't happen. Personally, one of my best friends who is a Catholic with me, who is right here with me. He's a Washington resident, and he's a good Catholic, and he's a good businessman. And Honorable Matthew Lee of Glotech, who support and finance our Matt, stand up. You're a big, chunky guy, so... Okay, thank you very much. And amongst the audience, here's one of my best friends who served in the White House many years and acting secretary under Reagan administration, Tom Donnelly. Also.
I'd like to welcome all of you to our first panel discussion for today, entitled Challenges and Opportunities in the U.S.-Korea Alliance. We have four very distinguished panelists who will be giving their perspectives on the recent summit and the critical issues that will shape our alliance moving forward. All of you have received their bios, and also Chairman Pong has done the privilege of introducing them, so I will not go into any great detail introducing our distinguished panel, but I will give each panelist about 10 minutes to speak, and then after each of them speak, we will move into Q&A session afterwards. With that, I will just briefly mention our speakers today. First of all, I'd like to introduce to you Professor and Dean Emeritus at the School of International Studies at American University, not University of Denver, there's a little typo here, but at American University, and a great friend of Korea, and actually KEI did their inaugural conference at SIS when they opened their new building, so we're honored to have the dean here. And of course, Gordon Flake, the Executive Director of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation, and then Mr. Sang-kyun Kim of MBC Kwang-ju. And then finally, Mr. Chan-sun Nam will be our fourth distinguished panelist today. And with that, I'll turn over to Dean Goodman.
You want me to speak from here? Or?
You can speak from here.
Okay, great. Well, it's great to be here today. And it's, as Pong Do-wong said, the previous conferences of this sort have been held at American University. And for those of you who haven't visited American University and the School of International Service new building recently, where, as Abe said, the inaugural conference was the KEI annual conference, please come and visit at the corner of New Mexico Avenue and Nebraska Avenue, and you'll know you're at the building, and you'll know you're at our Korea Garden when you see the Dol Harobang, which were donated by Jeju Island and by the Republic of Korea to the School of International Service at the time of the opening of the building and the time of our creation of the Korean Garden, which surrounds that building. Now, I am not a Korea specialist by training. I'm actually a Latin America specialist, although I've been to Korea more than 25 times over the last 20 years because of the strong ties between American University and Korea. And when I was invited to give this talk, I decided that I would give a talk that had to do with the long view of relations between the Republic of Korea and the United States, the long view back and the long view forward. And as a Latin Americanist, when I think of the long view back, I start about 50,000 years ago, when people from North Asia, whose descendants became the Geun-hye people who established the first kingdoms in Korea about 8,000 years ago, a small number of them took off by boats and eventually found their way to the west coast of North America, Canada and the United States, and over the course of the past 50,000 years populated all of North America and South America, the only residents of this continent until the advent of Christopher Columbus in 1492. So people think of U.S.-Korea relations as being relatively recent, but as a Latin America specialist, I think of Korea-U.S. relations as actually having a very, very long past, something that we might be able to build upon. In terms of contact with the West, I think you all know that in the late 16th century, the first Europeans visited Korea. You may not know that the United States contact with, or what became the United States contact with Korea, actually began around 1730 with the ginseng trade. Korea had had a 2,000-year monopoly of trade with China for ginseng, and when after North America, it was discovered that ginseng also grew in North America. So between 1730 and 1860, there was a ginseng trade war between Korea and Canada and the United States for supplying China. And among the investors in the ginseng trade in the United States were George Washington, John Jacob Astor, and Daniel Boone. It turned out that the North Americans fully exhausted their ginseng by 1860, and they had to import Koreans to teach them how to grow ginseng in the United States. But this was not the best of times in terms of commercial relations between Korea and the United States. At the end of the 19th century, I think you're all familiar with the beginnings of the relations between the United States and Korea. The incident of the sinking of the ship, the General Sherman, and the occupation of Kwang-ju Island by the U.S. Armed Forces, and the resultant signing of the Treaty of Chemulpo, which was signed because King Kong at that time believed that the United States, of all the foreign powers that were trying to open up East Asia, was the one with the most transparent agenda. And so they signed this treaty of permanent amity and peace between the Republic of Korea and the United States. It didn't last very long, I think everyone knows, because in 1904, there was the Taft-Katsura Agreement between the United States and Japan, in which Japan agreed to recognize the dominion of the United States over the Philippines and also the dominion of the United States over Hawaii, that the Japanese had close relations with the royal family in Hawaii. And in exchange, the United States agreed to recognize the dominion of Japan over Korea. In the first half of the 20th century, Koreans, especially Koreans who were interested in independence from Japan, were very encouraged by President Wilson's statements about self-determination. But despite the fact that many leaders of Korean independence operated out of the United States, Syngman Rhee from Hawaii, and Philip Jason from Philadelphia, and if you haven't seen the statue to Philip Jason in Sheridan Circle, it's a wonderful statue to go see. The United States was not really supportive of Korean independence the way these independence fighters had hoped that they would be. All of that changed with the attack on Pearl Harbor. And at that time, the United States developed a very, very different view of Japan, and as a result, a different view of Korean independence. And you can see a remnant of that change, because in 1943, Syngman Rhee came to the campus of American University and planted 4 cherry trees on the campus of American University. And he said that not only were those cherry trees Korean, but they were of the same variety as the cherry trees that the Japanese had given to the United States in 1912 that were planted in the tidal basin, but they actually came from Jeju Island rather than from Korea. And he used that as an example for why the United States should not trust the Japanese. And I invite you to visit the campus of American University. Right next to the Dolharobang are the 3 remaining cherry trees and a plaque that was put there by Korean students commemorating this planting. Since World War II, the United States and South Korea have had an unusually deep relationship based, of course, on the U.S. occupation of Korea from 1945 to 1948, and then the return of troops in 1950 with the outbreak of the Korean War, and their continuing presence under the terms of the U.S.-Korea Mutual Defense Pact. Over the time, Korea has been a key ally of the United States, sustaining its interests in East Asia, and U.S. trade and security support have been crucial for the remarkable political, economic, and cultural successes that one sees in Korea at the present time in 2013. So if this is the long view from the past, what might be the long view into the future? In her recent visit, President Park and President Obama agreed that the U.S.-Korea alliance should contribute to world peace as its fundamental goal. This statement was greeted with applause and also with skepticism here in Washington, D.C. Both leaders were well aware that President Park would soon make another very important trip abroad, this time to Beijing, China. I have friends who assert that it is the goal of the People's Republic of China to turn Korea from the United States and to reassert its centuries-old Chinese dominance of Korea. I have other friends who assert that the relatively new U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, forged through 12 long years of extensive negotiations, is actually the United States wedge into the Asia-only trade agreements that have been signed in recent years. This is, of course, the challenge. The opportunity is that the United States relationship, which after centuries of highs and lows, has experienced 60 years of unprecedented mutual trust and shared values. And the opportunity is that this special relationship can transcend these partisan views and really be transformed into a global partnership which would contribute, as President Park said, to the happiness and well-being of all humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Gordon?
Well, thank you. I'm always honored to be here at KEI and very impressed by the wonderful audience we have today. I am used to being paired on panels with academics or scholars who have a much broader historical, scope and perspective than I do. But I must say, I cannot compete with 50,000 years.
It's a challenge.
As such, I'm really going to be focusing on a much more narrow perspective, looking at just kind of 5 key issues that I think are very important in the coming days for U.S.-Korea relations, or at least that, from my perspective as a Korea analyst and watcher, are areas of both concern and promise for the relationship going forward. I want to start, however, by really congratulating Ambassador Choi and those who worked so hard on the embassy team here, as well as those in our own government, on a very successful summit. Summits are not easy. Given the whole range of things, I see those like Evans who have great experience with this nodding, because there's an awful lot that can and inevitably will go wrong. And in particular, if you think about the current environment that we're dealing with in Northeast Asia, with inter-Korean relationships and difficulties and this truly bizarre behavior by North Korea over the last 3 months, if not over the top, to Korea-Japan relations, to issues with territories in the South China Seas and China, to the myriad of other economic and other issues. This was really a difficult time, and yet, from my perspective, this was a very successful summit. I mean, I think President Park was greeted extremely warmly. Her speech to the joint session of Congress was a remarkable event, and I think very warmly received. Most importantly, from my perspective, and I'll talk about this as I get into the content of my remarks, there was no daylight between the United States and South Korea on the core issues related to the future of the alliance. And that's an accomplishment. That doesn't happen organically. So let me go through just kind of 5 key issues that I will discuss today, and I'll try to keep my remarks brief. If you asked me at the beginning of the year what I was most concerned about for the year 2013 in terms of U.S.-Korea relations, I would list in order the top 2. Number 1 being sensitivities surrounding our nuclear cooperation agreement, and number 2, Korea-Japan relations. So those are my first 2 points. Let me start with the 1, 2, 3 agreement. For those of you who haven't delved into this, and you're lucky if you haven't for the last several years, the 1954 Atomic Energy Act of the United States requires, before the United States shares nuclear technology or materials related to a nuclear energy program, that we have a peaceful use of nuclear technology agreement, or a 1, 2, 3 agreement named after Section 123 of the Act with that party. The United States reached an agreement like that with South Korea in 1974. And it's a 30-year agreement which comes due in March of next year. And so the United States and South Korea now for several years have been preparing to renegotiate this 1, 2, 3 agreement. But the environment has shifted, and it's made it a very challenging, difficult issue. From the American perspective, we have seen now, over 30 years plus of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, some weaknesses in the treaty and the structure. In other words, the more countries that have reprocessing, the more people that have enrichment technologies, the more difficult it is to control this type of technology and the proliferation, nuclear weapons risks that are out there. So in general, as a global trend, there's been an effort to kind of roll these things back in and rein them back in. On the other hand, South Korea has been a remarkable success story. Compared to where they were in 1974, if you look at South Korea today, not only a major nuclear power in its own right, but a nuclear exporter, having signed a major contract to export nuclear power plants to the United Arab Emirates, and a country that clearly has great ambitions for the future. And the tensions therein lied over some very sensitive issues. South Korea's desire to have, like Japan does, access to reprocessing rights or the full fuel cycle, as well as enrichment rights, and the United States' concern about the broader, not Korea-specific, but global expansion of those technologies and capabilities. And the truth is, we were at loggerheads. This is a very difficult thing to issue, and from my perspective, there were no issues, or few issues, that were more sensitive than this. Partly because it ties to the Japan question. Why does Japan have it and Korea doesn't? But even at a more fundamental level, is it's a question of sovereignty, how it's recognized in Korea, whether Korea's accomplishments were respected. So it was just rife with potential to blow up. And unfortunately for the second term of the Obama administration and President Park Geun-hye, this is an issue kind of put on their laps with really no time to negotiate. Given our congressional calendar and the South Korean National Assembly calendar, we would have had to have reached a deal by June of this year in order for it to have been put into place and implementation by March of next year. And simply there just wasn't enough time. So normally, when we talk about kicking the can down the road, and we talk about that a lot in Washington, D.C., it's a very negative connotation. It basically implies that the Congress, once again, is not doing what the Congress is supposed to do. In this case, I think kicking the can down the road is a very good thing. It's a recognition that we're far apart, that we are working together very closely as allies to study pyroprocessing and other options, but that we need some more time to kind of work this out to make sure we do it in a highly complementary way. So I am relieved. To be very blunt, I am relieved that this issue was one where we could agree that we weren't ready to agree. And that, to me, is actually a sign of a strong alliance, right? To be able to agree that you're not ready to agree and yet have it not spill over on a political level is a sign of great success. And so there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of debates to be had yet. But again, I think that's a positive step, and it relieved a major concern I had at the beginning of the year. The second point, obviously, unfortunately, is not resolved and will not be for quite some time, but it is the broader question of Korea-Japan relations. And for this audience, I don't need to go into the long litany of historical legacy issues, of territorial disputes, of issues which are not just Korea-Japan, but are being raised anew by the Abe administration in Japan right now. All I need to say is that if you're looking at this in the context of U.S.-Japan relations, there are a few issues right now that are more disruptive than the unfortunate relationship between our two principal allies in the region, between Korea and Japan. So we have remarkably strong alliance relationships with Japan, between the U.S. and Japan, and a remarkably strong alliance relationship between the U.S. and South Korea, but a very weak third leg there. And that relationship and the periodic outbursts on both sides related to that relationship has undermined, to be very blunt, our ability to respond effectively to very real North Korean threats. It has undermined our ability to coordinate, both in terms of logistics, in terms of communication, in terms of strategy to that North Korean threat. It continues to undermine our ability to respond jointly to the challenges surrounding the rise of China in the region and the many other territorial disputes. It undermines our ability to fulfill President Park's vision for a broader role for the U.S. and Korea, not only in the region, but the globe. And so I kind of highlight that as an area of ongoing concern. I will compliment President Park Geun-hye on this issue because thus far, and again, we're early in the administration, she has, I think, very skillfully been allowed her government to respond to statements and action taken in Japan, but she has kept herself above the fray, and that's, I think, very fortunate. If you look at the last decade, the worst periods of Korea-Japan relations were when the president of Korea felt obliged to respond to every low-level statement or suggestion that came out of Japan, himself effectively becoming an action officer. And again, I think what you really need to do is you need to preserve that space, and I think so far that has gone very well. The third point I want to address, and I'll move quicker through these last 3 points, is the obvious one. There's a whole panel after this, and so I won't go into great detail. But the traditional area of divergence for the last 15 years between the U.S. and the ROK has been how do we calibrate our respective response to North Korea. This is extremely difficult, as you might imagine. On one level, the North Korean threat is the fundamental rationale for our alliance, right? Our alliance was bathed in blood, born of a shared threat perception of North Korea. And over the last decade, as our respective threat perceptions have varied, depending on South Korea's policy, a sunshine policy, depending on American focus post 9/11 on nuclears and missiles that have different threats, we've really had some difficult time coordinating that policy. I alluded to it in my opening remarks. I think that this summit was particularly and notably successful in making sure that there was no daylight at all between the United States and South Korea in response to recent North Korean threats and actions. And that, again, I think is an accomplishment worth noting. Fourth point I'll lay out on the table is related to the third point in terms of that. But it's just something I thought, since this panel is titled Challenges and Opportunities for the U.S. ROK in the Future, I want to put out something that has come out of vogue to talk about, and that is unification. 15 years ago, everybody wanted to talk about unification. Every conference was unification. After the German experience, after the Kim Dae-jung administration, when the policy shifted to peaceful coexistence, and the objective was not to unify in the short run, but to unify in the long run, we all talked about integration, and eventually there became unification fatigue. But in my mind, there's no time more important for us to start focusing on this issue than right now. Again, and without sullying my reputation, whatever I may have, by predicting North Korea's imminent demise, I might say that while I personally can see no clear and convincing evidence of instability in North Korea, I am convinced that the North Korean leadership can see convincing and credible evidence of instability in North Korea, and much of what we've seen for the last 2 months is a reaction to that. And again, we'll go into it more in the question and answer period, but ultimately, I believe the role that the United States is perceived to be playing in the process of unification is the defining issue for the future of the U.S. presence on the alliance, on the peninsula, and for the future of the U.S.-Korea alliance. And I think it's getting a short shrift right now because we don't want to talk about it. But in the end, in the long run, that's the one issue we have to focus on. And then finally, and I'll just say it and wrap it up there with my last 1 minute there, the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. I think has been a tremendous success. We're right now very full into the implementation phase. There are obviously issues that have to be resolved going forward. I would just today want to put down a kind of a place marker and talk about what are the next steps. It has been very helpful from the waning days of the No administration during the entire 5-year term of the Lee Myung-bak administration and now in the first months of the Park Geun-hye administration to have this issue as a common agenda for the United States and its ally, where we really have reached what is truly a 21st century kind of gold standard free trade agreement. I would only point that, in my mind, the logical next step is a more proactive Korean role in the TPP, or Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Negotiations. Korea already has the gold standard negotiation, and the question really is at what point Korea will decide to join those negotiations and then become a more proactive partner in the United States in establishing those standards and norms on a regional basis. So I will end my remarks there. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Kim?
As I was introduced, my name is Kim, and I had worked MBC correspondent in Washington in 1990 era. So it's very rare for us to speak in English in front of public gentlemen or citizens. Furthermore, and my previous speakers so fluently use English so well, I am very in a worse position to speak in English what I'd like to say to you. Please understand my situation. As I was a journalist, I'd like to start my statement based on the previous summit communique done by the Korean President Park and U.S. President Obama. They were celebrating the 60th anniversary of Korea-U.S. alliance system. I will let you know the 60th anniversary in Korean society what the 60th anniversary implies. When someone's grown up and mark the 60th birthday, and all the families gathering together and having a great party for the person who 60 years old. Nowadays, that trend is decreasing because so many people are grown up over 60 and 70s, even Pong's approaching 80 now.
He's only 60 years old.
So in Korean society, 60th anniversary implies a specific significance, importance. So the two presidents last week were celebrating the 60th anniversary of Korea-U.S. alliance. It implies to the Korean people that some very important change will take place, or some possible breakthrough might take place in the Korean-U.S. relationship or in South and North Korean relations. They are looking forward to some possible change or breakthrough. Of course, as I'm not a fortune teller, I could not say in advance what the future would be like. But logically speaking, as a journalist, I sense that 60th anniversary implies some possible future, breakthrough or change, especially in the relationship between South and North Korea. It should expect that change, in my view. Let me say one thing again. As you know well, the United States is the most powerful country in the world. Nobody would deny it. And Korea, even though they are supported by the United States militarily or economically, Korea, I might say, Korea is the most successful country the United States has had relationship with. In other words, the best successful country among nations that the United States has supported. And then the two presidents were celebrating 60th anniversary last week. Let's say one is the most powerful country in the world. The other one is most successful country in the world, in some sense. And then the two leaders are getting together and announcing 60th anniversary of their alliance to the world. And then as a journalist, I expect some big change would or should take place this year, because this is the 60th anniversary of two nations alliance system. Whether I am right or wrong, it depends on the future situations. As the previous speaker, Mr. Flake, mentioned, the current situation between South and North Korea is very difficult. No daylight. But I'd like to say, if the dark is deepening, the light will come soon. Or as I remember, well, I could not remember the Wordsworth lyric, the poems really. If winter comes, how far spring is far behind? I'm not sure. Anyway, in some sense, the one extreme of the thing lead to the other extreme. There are many sayings suggesting that the sort of a phenomenon. So in my view, if we were celebrating 60th anniversary this year, we should also mark some great change in the relationship between South and North Korea. That's my view. So I want to look forward to some possible and peaceful change in the near future with regard to South and North Korean relationship. And then, what should I do and what should Americans do? As I told before, I'm not a fortune teller. But I look forward to some possible or some unexpected thing will happen in this year. That's why we were celebrating the 60th anniversary of this year. Am I right or wrong? It depends on you. Thank you.
Mr. Na?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon and Mr. Goodman, who commanded the summit. This summit, President Park and Mr. Obama is very successfully performed and did. Now, as Mr. Gordon already pointed out, I prepared to talk with you about the 3 points, 3 problems. One is the nuclear program, and second is, yes. Transition of operational control of Korean force. Now, it's very difficult to remember these kinds of words as Korean because I'm not, as Mr. Kim said to me, to you, I'm not a fluent English speaker, but I can speak Korean better than English. So I'm very sorry that I cannot say what I'm now thinking in my mind. If you want to speak in Korean, then I can say better than like this. So I can say, same as Gordon and Mr. Goodman said. Now, anyway, I will try to impress my mind and my thought, my idea about the recent environment and the phenomenon in Korean Peninsula. First problem is just nuclear reprocessing program. Now, Korean government wants to have, the reprocess now the system of reprocessing nuclear waste. But I don't know exactly why 2 countries have not such more confidence about the nuclear weapons. Mr. Gordon already pointed out. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. Flake. Okay. Now there are 2 opposite opinions, I think, but that different opinion could be solved by more broad and wide discussions between 2 countries. The problem, the South Korean government wants to have the reprocessing system of nuclear waste, but the United States doesn't. United States, the U.S. doesn't have confidence about the Korean government thought or ideas. As Mr. Flake already pointed, the 2 countries have different vision or different thought about the nuclear program. But nowadays, we can solve such kinds of differences could be solved by, negotiations. I think there's a way. Whether United States whether as the U.S. government were concerned making the nuclear weapons, or use it economical or economically properly used for development economic situation in Korea, nuclear plant situation in Korea. So I asked these kinds of problem to Mr. Choi, the ambassador Washington D.C. or Korean ambassador to Washington D.C. But it will take more than 2 more years or such like that to find out the appropriate way to narrow the gaps of thought Washington and Seoul. So I hope we have, 2 countries have the possibility or ability or capability to narrow the opinion gap. So I hope in the near future, 2 countries reach an agreement, appropriate way with erase the U.S. concern about developing nuclear weapons, making nuclear weapons, and boosting Korean thought that we can use the waste, nuclear waste, to use for the economic developments. So second is just transition of operational control of Korean force. What I mean is, the 2 countries decided that the U.S.-Korea Combined Forces Command would be terminated as part of the transitions to replace with a separate Korean and U.S. command with a U.S. in a supporting role. Now, Mr. Pong already said North Korea is always threatened to South Korea or the Japan and United States with their nuclear weapons. So these kinds of transition, we have to think, this kind of transition could help in our situations or not. The reading Congressman Jung in Korea already insists that South Korea should have the nuclear weapon in order to face the North Korean threat. Now let's think like this. Yes, the Washington worry is that if South Korea has the nuclear weapon, then Japan would not keep silent. No. But our situation is different. Our mind is a little different. I would like to say, okay, then we have to just keep silent and just see the North Korean threat without nothing to comfort deterrence. So I'm not fully agree with Congressman Jung, but there are great reasons why such a famous person insists like that. I think it's these kinds of sentiments or these kinds of thoughts is taking place in some portion of Korean opinion readers and public opinion. So therefore now let's think about the transition of the operational control of Korean force. Yes, we would like to get such a command position as our independent nations. We don't want to interfere by United States. It's a very realistic logic. It can be understandable by our people. But let's think of another aspect. Belligerent North Korean threats. We are facing the very bellicose rhetorics from North Korea. Now, let's suppose, what if North Korea, we own control power or to operational power our military force. Then, what the North Korean government, Pyongyang, will think. What I mean is, we want to have confidence about our power to defend our country. But when the transition happens, can we have such kind of confidence to compete with North Korea? No. We don't have such a confidence, such a strong position now. In this point, I would like to suggest, or I would like to insist, that transition should be delayed, or we need more time to prepare our self-defense. Until that time, the transition should be delayed. The third one is, the initiative of Northeastern Asia proposed by President Park. Yes, I know very well. Park's proposal was not as much welcomed by the U.S. Congress or the U.S. citizens because it's a little vacant. There's no context. Anyway, as Mr. Goodman and Mr. Flake commend the result of the committee, I would like to support President Park's suggestion to have such kinds of cooperative system in East Asia. Now, all these problems, I would like to ask about these problems to Mr. Gordon, Mr. Flake, and Mr. Goodman. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had a very comprehensive commentary on not only President Park's visit last week, but also a whirlwind history lesson from Dean Goodman, and as well as some great insights from our other panelists. As it's clear from the speaker's comments, last week was a very successful summit, a milestone marking the 60th anniversary of this alliance. And as Gordon said, there's no daylight on a lot of these issues between the two governments, including North Korea and international cooperation. But it's clear from our from our panelists that there are challenges and there are more work to be done. Ranging from the civil and nuclear cooperation to OPCON transfer to the Korea-Japan relationship, and an opportunity not only to grow but to perhaps change, hopefully in a positive direction. So with that, we open the floor to questions. We will take, we only have about 30 minutes for this panel for questions, so we'll take a couple of questions and then we'll allow the panelists to respond. So let's go right here, and right here. So Richard, and then gentleman next to you, and then Rob.
Hi, Richard Shin with Economist Incorporated. Thank you for a very nice presentation. I have two very short questions. First one is basically that there are very few American Koreans, but there are a large contingent of Korean Americans in this country. And I was wondering what would be their role in the U.S.-Korea relationship, and how would Korean government and the U.S. government deal with this population to increase cooperation between the two countries and improve relations between the two countries. Now, one thing that you should keep in mind is that the recent trip by President Park resulted in a charge of sexual abuse of Korean-American intern, and that has created some kind of negative feeling among Korean-Americans that they feel that Koreans view Korean-Americans in a derogatory manner, and I was wondering if you could address that particular point. Second question really deals directly with Gordon's point about, just kicking the can down the road is a good thing because we decide to, agree to not to agree at this point. But on the other hand, Obama administration knew that this was coming due in 2014. So that Lee Myung-bak administration knew that this was coming due in 2014. They all knew the time schedule. And so if they had started the process maybe 2 years earlier, we wouldn't be in a situation where we have to kick the bucket.
Don't kick the bucket.
Sorry about that. That's not what I meant. But I mean, but anyways, we wouldn't have to do this 2-year delay. And I was wondering, what happened there and who failed, and I mean, why did we get to that position?
Thank you. Right here.
My name is Peter Humphrey. I'm an intelligence analyst. I'm wondering if there is an open or secret agreement with South Korea that a unified Korea will not be a possessor of nuclear weapons, that it will not inherit the North's nuclear weapons, so that there would be sort of a Kazakhstan-style agreement between the U.S. and Korea. And more importantly, if such an agreement exists, does China know about it? My thought here is that if China is assured that unified Korea is not going to be a nuclear weapons power, that it is that much less likely to intervene to prop up the Kim regime.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Rob Warren. I'd like to ask an amplification on Mr. Nan's comment, and that was that it's a rather vague proposition that came out of the summit by South Korea to organize a regional dialogue in Northeast Asia. What is the potential of that, and what type of role, leadership role, would South Korea, and what would be the expectation?
Okay, so we've got a broad range of questions, ranging from Korean American community and their role to the nuclear cooperation deal to any kind of secret agreement on the future of these nuclear weapons to the regional dialogue issues. Yes, John?
As well, I am a retired reporter, so I don't have a special knowledge about your background, some secrets behind the summits. But I think that could be, respecting now the reviewing my experience as a reporter, there could be some kinds of agreements behind this summit. It could be done by working groups. But I don't know exactly what the secret agreement is.
Okay.
This question that was asked about Korean Americans and what role that they might have, I think it's a tremendous advantage for the relationship that there are so many Koreans or Korean Americans, some second generation, living in the United States who maintain their knowledge of Korea and can facilitate and deepen the already deep relationship. In the 25, almost 30 years that since I started being Dean of the School of International Service, there have been many Korean Americans from my school that have gone to Seoul to study. And initially, they reported lots of derogatory comments by Koreans about their being there. They don't report that anymore. I think that there's, at least from their experience, there's a big change. And as Mr. Nam said, Korea is viewed as one of, if not the most successful countries in the world in terms of the progress made over the last 20 or 30 years. I travel around Latin America. I'm spending a lot of time in West Asia now. People around the world are eager to relate to Korea because of its success. And I think that, this experience washes over for Korean Americans and also for Korea itself. So I think it's very, very good for the kinds of progress that's been made. I think it also relates very strongly to an aspect of the recent summit that President Park emphasized that we didn't talk about, which is economic relations. She made a very strong pitch for more visas. She and President Obama signed agreements about technology cooperation, and those indicate two things. There's already a strong economic relationship between Korea and the United States, and it's not going to stop. It's going to get deeper. There's going to be more trade, and that will be more important for both countries in the future. If it stops, or if it slows down, we're both in trouble. Secondly, I think Mr. Nam's point about 60 years, what is the big change going to happen? I think there are two changes. One is in the economic relationship. The imbalance between Korea and the United States in terms of leadership is changing. Korea is ahead of the United States in many technological areas, and I think that was recognized in this agreement, and that's a huge change. And the second thing that I think we should look for after 60 years is another area that we didn't talk about, and that is culture. Korea is a world leader in culture. I traveled to Latin America. The most popular singer among 13 and 14-year-old teenagers in Lima, Peru, is Young-soo Kim, the lead singer for Girls' Generation. That's going to be very important as these young people grow up all around the world. And I don't have to tell you about Psy's success on YouTube. I mean, we can laugh about this. We can laugh about the fact that when I travel from Tokyo to Seoul, everyone else on the plane are middle-aged Japanese women who are there to see their soap opera heroes in Seoul. The cultural projection of Korea is another huge change. So after 60 years, while we might talk, as we did, so much about the security relations, and they are very important, the economic relations and the cultural relations are really, really, really important. So I think, Mr. Kim, you were very wise to ask what's happening after 60 years, and I think these are big things.
Lou, I think you bring up a great point. I think we tend to focus on the president, but the entourage that she traveled with was actually an impressive group of people. I mean, CEOs of major corporations such as, Samsung, Hyundai Motors, and so forth. And I think we kind of overlooked that. But the fact that not only there's political prowess there, but there was economic prowess that came with that. So
don't short sell the cultural stuff.
Yeah, and the cultural stuff, of course. So
okay, now Mr. Gentleman asked me about the initiative, Mr. Park's initiative for Northeast Asia.
Yes.
Okay. Can I answer that?
Sure, please.
Okay, yes. Now, just the gentleman's questions about the initiative for Northeastern Asia from the President Park. I will tell you about it. But I think South Korean government has not concrete or detailed contents of such kinds of announcement. It's just an announcement. So, when we think it practically, there are many problems to make such kinds of cooperative system, because the Japan and China, North Korea, these three countries have a different interest relating to economic or political or geographical environments. So I think it's a little difficult to achieve arrive the goal which the President Park told in the United States, in the U.S. Congress. But I think it has its own words. It could be symbolic, but it could exert the influence on that area. So I would like to say, even we can't expect the result of the announcement, but I think right now it has some kinds of influence. Thank you.
Gordon, please.
Let me just respond to a couple of the questions, beginning with the question of whose fault was it that we didn't get the deal done on the 123 agreement. Yeah, it is true. We've known about it for 30 years in terms of the deadline. It shouldn't have been a surprise. To be really candid, the Lee Myung-bak administration spent all their political capital getting KORES passed. And that's something I'm personally grateful for, I think the U.S. is grateful for, and I think the business community is grateful for. But really, we know very well the last year of his administration was very much a lame duck, and the notion that he had the political heft to kind of push through something this sensitive is again, the primary reason. And so again, it's really unfair to the Park Geun-hye administration to assume that within 2 months they could resolve it. There is actually something more substantive here, and I want to respond a little bit to what Dr. Nam was saying. I don't see this as so much a question of confidence or a lack of U.S. confidence in South Korea. That's not the issue. In fact, the U.S. opposition has nothing to do with Korea. It's a question of precedence, not confidence. So the question is, if South Korea can do it, then why not Iran or whatever, everybody else, right? So this is a question of a global regime and global priorities that are butting up against South Korea's kind of personal aspirations, and that is difficult. Personally, I would like this not to be, kicked down the road just 2 years, but maybe 5 or 10 years until we see the outcome of this joint U.S. ROK study on pyroprocessing. Because, again, many people don't realize this, but the United States does not reprocess for our nuclear energy program, our commercial nuclear energy program. We don't do it. We find it inefficient, uneconomical, and dangerous, right? And we said we have not done it since 1979, right? And so we're not exactly being hypocritical in this regard. I would add one other point here. Mr. Nam was mentioning that when he was talking about the transfer of wartime OPCON, that you have a prominent South Korean politician, Mr. MJ Jung or Chung Mong-jun, who was calling for the reintroduction of U.S. tactical nukes or for South Korea to go nuclear. And in response to that, there was an Asan survey which showed some 60% of South Koreans favored South Korea going nuclear. That is actually a very useful poll and statement in negotiating with the Chinese over North Korea, because that allows us to say to the Chinese, look, because you're not reigning in North Korea, the South Koreans may go nuclear. I would suggest it is not very helpful when you're trying to negotiate a nuclear cooperation agreement, when 60% of your public says we want to go nuclear. So the timing was really not right for this, right? Does that make sense? I'll put that together. Let me allude just a couple of other things very briefly. The question of wartime operational control. Many of you know this was an issue that was pushed in a very nationalistic way by the Geun-hye administration, couched in terms of South Korea taking back sovereignty from the Americans. And they were very surprised to find that under Secretary Rumsfeld, they were pushing on an open door, and the Americans said, sure, yours, take it. 2009, you got it. And they were kind of shocked by it. And so there was a negotiation to push it back to 2012. And then as a favor, to President Lee Myung-bak, President Obama said, okay, we'll push it back to 2015. At this point, I've not met anybody other than retired generals, or in the public sector who actually thinks we should push it back further. If you talk to the actual, not anyone's thought that, people within the military itself, if you talk to the DOD, defense establishment here and the Ministry of Defense in South Korea, they're working this very carefully. They've got a very good solid plan. There are ways that they will make sure that we preserve the best of what we had under Combined Forces Command and go forward. Now, obviously, if there was another couple months like we've had for the last 2 months, or a fundamental change on the security dependence, so that may cause us to shift our timing. But as of right now, I think Korea is remarkably capable and moving forward and wants to move forward if you talk to the government and you talk to the Ministry of Defense at that point. The final point I'll mention is on the question of this broader Northeast Asia proposal, and I couldn't agree with Mr. Nam more. This is an interesting idea. It has potential. It's clearly where the U.S. would like to go in terms of broader regional stuff, but as of now, it's a slogan in search of substance. It's not there yet. I would just take an opportunity to throw a reference to my earlier remarks on here, though. It is also a proposal that is impossible absent improved Korea-Japan relations. You cannot have a meaningful Northeast Asian proactive initiative while Korea-Japan relations as two allies are not good. So I would throw those 3 points out.
There's Jim Pritz back there, and then we'll have Bill.
Thank you. I think Gordon answered my question, which was going to be looking at the importance of the 1-2-3 agreement. How do we accommodate our global concerns in terms of non-proliferation and ROK's concerns about its own economic interests? And I think Gordon answered the question by saying we're going to kick the can down the road for another 5 to 10 years. But I would ask for some thoughts. Is there an accommodation possible and on what terms?
And right here, Mike. And then Bernie.
Mike Billington from Executive Intelligence Review. While the Park trip was very positive, as you've all said, there was one bone of contention which came out afterwards from the Ministry of Defense in Korea, which objected quite strongly to the implication in the press conference between President Obama and President Park that Korea was part of or in some way associated with the ABM, anti-ballistic missile system policy of the United States. And my understanding is that the Foreign Ministry not only objected and said we have our own, but also said clearly that the U.S. ABM system is viewed as a threat to China, not just to North Korea. And that President Park, or perhaps only the Defense Ministry, said that we're far more concerned with the ABM systems than with the short-term threat from North Korea, which is a very interesting statement. So I wonder if both one of the Americans or one of the Koreans could give me your view of that whole issue.
Great.
Thank you. Ernie Krieg, Manufacturers Alliance. I'd like to build on, in terms of the economic relationship, and put the issue in a little broader context, that of the radical restructuring of global economic powers since the turn of the millennium. In 2000, the U.S. was by far #1, whereas today, in terms of exports, finance, China's #1. And the restructuring is even more radical within the Asia region. Just one example for manufactured exports, which 75% of U.S. exports, 95% of Chinese exports. In 2000, our exports globally were 3 times larger than China. Today, China's 80% larger than us. They're going to double by next year. And this is big, really big for South Korea, which is negotiating, the first industrialized country to negotiate a free trade agreement with China, because China's your #1 trading partner, gets bigger and bigger each year. So my question is, in this quite rapidly changing set of economic interests, what's in store for changes in economic strategy by the governments, and in particular, the economic strategy between China and South Korea?
Okay. We have 3 great questions. One about nuclear cooperation, one about ABM, and then one about actually the balancing of U.S.-China relations, given the shifting economic dynamics in the region.
Why don't I start and then others can follow up? As to what the likely accommodation is going forward, that's a very good question, and one that I don't have a clear answer to. The way I would rephrase that question is, whose side is time on? If you look at the U.S. position and you look at South Korea's position. So if we decide to delay the agreement for 5 years or 10 years, looking back, which side will think, oh, I wish we would have struck a deal in 2013? If you're South Korea right now, and as time goes on, if the U.S. Nuclear renaissance fizzles, tied to Japan, we don't do much, we become increasingly less relevant in that field. South Korea manages to export a few more power plants, and it gains greater access to uranium and other materials that is not coming from the U.S. South Korea will have a much stronger nuclear negotiating leverage. They won't need it. Essentially, they could not renew the agreement and go ahead and do it on their own. On a more positive light, if our joint study on pyroprocessing actually bears fruit, we could be jointly developing, these small modular, reactors, integral fast reactors that would actually use this type of fuel, and then we might work together. Where we stand right now is that it's hard to make hard judgments on either side, and this is why I think neither side has been willing to kind of really go to the mat on this, because we just don't quite know. If that makes sense. Again, as I was mentioning, the U.S. doesn't reprocess. The South Korean case for reprocessing right now isn't quite there yet, because the reality is, publicly South Koreans complain we're a small country, we have no more space in our spent fuel pods, we can't put the fuel in there, so we must do this. But the reality is, even if they decided to successfully do pyroprocessing in 20 or 30 years, it would be 20 or 30 years before something came up, and that would only take care of maybe 10 to 20% of their spent fuel rods. So it's not a solution to the problems that it is being sold as a solution to. So there's something that's there. We just don't have enough data. We're just going to have to work together. And I agree with the other panelists. We're allies. We should be able to work on this. And I wasn't being flippant when I said it is a sign of strength in the alliance when we can agree that we're not yet capable of agreeing. And not have that shake us politically. It hasn't spilled over in terms of nasty battles, recriminations. We just, we're working on it. That's what it comes down to right now. The ABM treaty is actually a very good question, and it is a troubling area that leads to a more sensitive, broader challenge we've had over the last several decades with South Korea, and it's tied to the economic question. As China grows in economic significance and importance, and its role in Korea grows, then Korea is going to be increasingly wary of participating in activities that are perceived to be, rightly or wrongly, anti-Chinese. Hence, Korea is not in the TPP yet, primarily because of that perception. And likewise, Korea very much is very supportive of the U.S., I think almost across the board, in terms of theater missile defense, or in terms of the function. What they're wary of is the political ramifications of participating in something that is perceived to be anti-Chinese. And so this is a case where they're trying to maintain strong alliance relations with the United States and cooperate, and at the same time not anger their largest trade partner. And that's the type of tension I think we need to anticipate going forward.
Okay, I totally agree with your opinions, but in this place I would like to suggest that the delegates from the United States and Korea work together. I usually take the examples of when some people have very different ideas or insistence. Now, I told the students, hey, let's go to Jeju Island. You can see the Halla Mountain. You know Halla Mountain? The shape is like a triangle. Then you go to the Seogwipo, another side, back side of Hallasan. You can see different shape of Hallasan. Now, there's no profit, no usable pragmatic way to fight each other with the shape which they show. So now the problem of the represent nuclear waste, these kinds of the elements. And the second is the ABM. It's a very delicate problem. Some experts are worried about that. Korea could be prompt of the conflicts between China and Beijing and Washington. This kind of problem is used by anti-Americanism. So I think, the ABM system problem should be dealt with very cautious and very thoughtful mind. That's all.
Okay. Ernie's question about the changing economic relations and the rise of China. I think one thing we have to remember, the rise of China vis-a-vis the United States isn't the only thing. There's also the European Union, whose economy in some measures is larger than the United States. And what does the rise of China mean? Does it mean that the United States and the European Union are less powerful than they were before? I would argue no. There's a book that just came out by Moises Naim about the nature of power in the world. And the argument that he makes is that there's more power available today than there ever was before. And there's going to be more power in the future. And so I would argue, I agree with his point, that the United States continues to have the power it had before and even more power. And China is also increasing. But also, Indonesia is increasing in power. Look at its trade statistics. Look at its political record. India is increasing. Turkey is increasing. Brazil is increasing. There is, as Ernie said, a radical restructuring of economic relations in the world. And it's moving us away from a unipolar or bipolar or tripolar world to a multipolar world in which there'll be a lot more opportunities, a lot more room for if one nation starts to falter like Japan did and slow down the global economic project, others might be able to pick things up. Now, hopefully we won't get into some kind of a trade war where we fall into some global economic negative situation like has happened a number of times in the past. But I think Ernie is very right to point out that there is a radical global restructuring. But I think it's very important to point that it's not a zero-sum game. It's a multiple sum, it's a positive sum game, and instead of 2 or 3 powers, there's at least 7 or 8 operating in the world and more in the years to come.
Great. Well, it's 3:30, and please help me thank our guests for a real rich and fruitful discussion today. Thank you very much.